The sea was my life. From the moment I first set foot on a ship as a young boy, I knew there was no other place I'd rather be. The waves were my companions, the salt in the air my sustenance, and the endless horizon my destination. My name is Jeremy, and for as long as I could remember, I had been a sailor. But after years of wandering from port to port, traveling the world, and seeing all its wonders, I found myself yearning for something different. I wanted to find a place where I could stay, a small town where I could plant roots, make connections, and live a life of quiet contentment. The idea first struck me as I stood on the deck of my ship one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The ocean stretched out in all directions, vast and unending, but for the first time, it didn't fill me with the same sense of freedom it once had. Instead, I felt a twinge of longing for stability, for a place to call home. I realized that, while I loved the sea, I was tired of the constant motion, the never-ending journey from one place to another. I wanted to settle down, to find a place where I could belong. As the weeks passed, the feeling grew stronger. I found myself daydreaming about small towns with cozy houses, friendly neighbors, and a slower pace of life. I imagined walking through quiet streets, greeting familiar faces, and feeling a sense of peace and contentment. But the life of a sailor is not one where you can easily decide to settle down. I was always on the move, and finding a place to stay seemed like an impossible dream. One day, as my ship docked at a small port town, I found myself lingering longer than usual. It was a quaint little place, with cobblestone streets, charming cottages, and a picturesque harbor filled with fishing boats. The town had a certain charm that drew me in, and I couldn't help but feel a pull towards it. I decided to take a walk through the town, to see what it was like. As I strolled through the streets, I noticed the people going about their daily lives. They were friendly, greeting each other with smiles and waves, and there was a sense of community that was palpable. It was a stark contrast to the transient life I had been living, where people came and went, and connections were fleeting. I felt a warmth in my chest, a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. I continued to explore the town, stopping at a small cafe for a cup of coffee. The owner, a kindly old man with a white beard, struck up a conversation with me. We talked about the town, its history, and the people who lived there. He told me that the town was a close-knit community, where everyone knew each other and looked out for one another. As I listened, I felt a deep sense of longing. This was the kind of place I had been dreaming of, a place where I could build a life. But as much as I wanted to stay, I knew that my life as a sailor wouldn't allow it. My ship was scheduled to leave in a few days, and I had no choice but to go with it. I thanked the cafe owner for the conversation and left, feeling a pang of regret as I walked back to the harbor. That night, as I lay in my bunk, I couldn't stop thinking about the town. I wished with all my heart that I could stay, that I could find a way to make it my home. As I drifted off to sleep, I imagined what it would be like to live there, to wake up each day and see the same familiar faces, to walk through the streets and feel a sense of belonging. When I woke up the next morning, I felt a strange sense of calm. It was as if something had shifted inside me, as if the universe had heard my longing and was conspiring to grant my wish. I got up and went about my duties, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Later that day, the captain called me into his quarters. He had a serious look on his face, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. He told me that the ship's engine had developed a serious problem, and it would take at least a month to repair. We were going to be stuck in the town for the next few weeks. At first, I was shocked. A month was a long time, longer than we had ever stayed in any one place. But as the news sank in, I felt a surge of excitement. This was my chance, the opportunity one had been hoping for. I would have a whole month to explore the town, to get to know the people, and to see if it was the place I wanted to call home. Over the next few days, I threw myself into the town's life. I spent my mornings walking through the streets, chatting with the locals, and learning about the town's history. I visited the market, where farmers sold fresh produce and fishermen hawked their catch. I discovered a small bookstore filled with old, dusty volumes, and I spent hours browsing the shelves. I even attended a town meeting, where I was welcomed with open arms. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself growing more and more attached to the town. I made friends with the cafe owner, who introduced me to other locals. I met a retired sailor who had settled in the town years ago and who shared stories of his own travels. I even found myself drawn to a small cottage on the outskirts of town, with a garden full of flowers and a view of the harbor. It was the kind of place I had always dreamed of living in, and I couldn't help but imagine myself living there. The more time I spent in the town, the more I realized that this was where I wanted to be. I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging that I had been searching for. I knew that I didn't want to leave, that I wanted to make this town my home. As the month drew to a close, I began to make plans. I talked to the captain and told him of my decision to stay. He was surprised but understanding, and he wished me well. I spoke to the cafe owner, who offered to help me find work in the town, and I made an offer on the cottage, which was accepted by the owner. On the day the ship was set to leave, I stood on the dock and watched as it sailed away. I felt a twinge of sadness, knowing that I was leaving behind the life I had known for so long. But that sadness was outweighed by a sense of excitement and anticipation for the new life I was about to begin. In the months that followed, I settled into my new life in the town. I found work at the local marina, helping to repair boats and keep the harbor in good condition. I made friends with the locals, who welcomed me into their community with open arms. And I made the cottage my home, filling it with books, plants, and the trinkets I had collected on my travels. As the years passed, I found a sense of fulfillment and contentment that I had never known before. I no longer felt the need to wander, to search for something that always seemed just out of reach. I had found my place, my home, and I was happy. Looking back, I realized that the month I spent in that small town was the turning point in my life. It was a time of discovery, of connection, and of finding the place where I truly belonged. I am grateful for that time, and for the people who welcomed me into their lives. And I am thankful for the sea, which led me to the place where I was meant to be.